You wake up. It's still dark. Somewhere in the town, a drum is going, slow and steady, and you already know what it means because everyone does. The king is going to war, and you are going with him. You didn't sign up for this, and nobody swept you off the street. You're going because of something you own. And that's the strange part. The part worth 10 minutes of your time. In the Bronze Age, being a soldier wasn't a job you took. It was a bill that came attached to your land. Let me show you how you'd have ended up in that column, what you'd carry, what you'd face, and the genuinely surprising thing the state owed you in return. Start with how you ended up in that column at all. You own a field. Barley on the flat, date palms along the ditch, a mud brick house at the edge. It feeds your family and it'll feed your son after you. You didn't buy it. The king gave it to you. And in Hammurabi's Babylon, there's a word for what came with it. Ilkum, the service. The field isn't property the way you'd think of property. It's closer to a post that comes with a house. You hold the land. In return, when the crown calls, you march. Nobody enlisted. You inherited a duty the way you inherited the soil. Could you refuse? You could. Once. The law is blunt about it. A soldier ordered on a royal campaign who doesn't go is put to death. And there's a second clause on that same line that shows you how the system really ran. The man who reports you gets your house. Think about what that does to a village. Your neighbor knows exactly which morning the muster left and whether you were on it. If you hide, he doesn't just get the satisfaction of turning you in, he gets your field. The king didn't need military police. He made everyone who lived near you into one. And you couldn't buy your way out either. Hire a man to march in your place and the penalty is the same. Death. And again, the informant takes the estate. The rule runs uphill too. An officer who pockets conscripts or accepts a paid substitute is executed just the same. Nor can you quietly sell the land to dodge the duty. The code forbids signing an ilkum field over to your wife or daughter or using it to clear a debt. The obligation is welded to the dirt. That's what once meant. You can refuse a royal summons exactly one time, and it's also the last decision you'll ever make. So you go. And you carry almost nothing you'd call a uniform, a spear. First and above all, it's the Bronze Age infantryman's whole world. Long enough to keep an enemy at arm's reach, cheap enough to arm thousands, standard enough that a broken one is swapped from stores. A dagger on your belt for the moment the line breaks and everything turns to close ugly work. Maybe a sling, an axe, a few javelins to throw, something leather on your head early in the age, bronze if you're lucky and it's late enough. But the thing that keeps you alive isn't in your hands. It's the man next to you. A row of spears is a wall. A row of spears with a gap in it is just a row of spears. You live or die by whether the men on either side of you hold, which means the person you trust most in the world, for a while, is whoever the muster happened to stand beside you. Then the marching ends, and you find out what you're there for. Here's the one Bronze Age battle we can genuinely reconstruct, because both sides wrote it down. Kadesh, around 1274 BCE. Egypt under Ramesses against the Hittites. It's the largest chariot clash anyone knows of. Forget the pharaoh for a second, though. You're not the pharaoh. You're in the line. What Kadesh shows you is how fast it could all go wrong. Ramesses trusted 2 scouts who told him the enemy was far off. They'd been sent to lie. The Hittites were waiting, and they smashed into an Egyptian division strung out on the march. Men exactly like you, tired, spread thin, not ready. Chariots tore straight through the column and into the camp. That's the truth of it. The charioteers were the aristocrats, the expensive elite. You watched them the way you'd watch cavalry, from the ground, on foot, hoping the wall of spears around you held while the fast, terrible machines went by. A battle wasn't a duel, it was a crowd. And whether you lived often had nothing to do with how brave you were, and everything to do with whether the formation kept its shape. And most of a campaign wasn't even the fighting. It was the walking, weeks of it, in the heat, on food you carried or foraged, sleeping on the ground among men from villages you'd never heard of, waiting for a battle that might last a single afternoon. Some men in your column had done this before and knew how it went. Some were farmers who had never held a spear in anger and never would again after this one season. You were all in the same line, and the line did not care which kind you were. It only cared that you held your place in it. And here's the thing the men in that line feared most, and it wasn't dying. A dead soldier is a settled matter. Grieved, buried, done. Being captured was the nightmare. because it left you alive in a foreign kingdom for years, with no way home and no way to send word. And back in your own village, that field of yours is sitting there with no one performing the service on it. Remember the neighbor who could have taken your house for reporting you? A field with no soldier on it starts to look, to a certain kind of man, like an opening. So capture didn't just threaten you. It threatened everything the field was supposed to protect, which is where this whole arrangement does something you would never expect. You'd assume you were on your own out there. You weren't. The law protects your land while you're gone. If your field was handed to someone else during your captivity and you make it home, you get it back and resume your service. If you never come home, the field passes to your son and the duty with it. If he's too young to serve, part of the land goes to his mother to raise him on until he's old enough to take your place in the line. Your absence doesn't erase you. The system just waits for the next version of you to grow up. And then there's the ransom. Merchants crossed borders that armies couldn't. Trading caravans moved between enemy kingdoms constantly. Say one of them finds you and buys your freedom and brings you home, you owe him. If your household can pay, you pay. But if you can't, the temple of your town pays him. And if the temple can't, the palace pays. The king buys you back. And the law adds one more line, so specific someone must have tried the alternative. Your field, your orchard, and your house may not be sold to cover it. Read that backwards, and it stops looking like mercy. The state decided a trained soldier is worth more brought home than the cost of bringing him home, and that recovering him must not bankrupt his family, because a broke family can't hold the land, and land with no one on it can't raise the next soldier. So the palace eats the cost. 3,500 years before the phrase existed, that is a state-funded prisoner of war recovery scheme, with an asset protection clause bolted on. You are not a hero to this system. You are infrastructure, the same way the canals were infrastructure. And infrastructure gets maintained, protected, recovered, repaired, not out of love, but because the alternative costs more. So what happened when you finally came home? No parade, no medal, no land granted for valor because you already had the land. That was the whole point. The land is why you went. They handed you back your field exactly as it was. And you picked the barley and cleared the ditch and waited. Because somewhere up north eventually, a drum would start again. And we tend to picture the ancient soldier as a warrior who happened to own a house. Turn it around. He was a farmer, and the spear was a term in his lease. He didn't join, he inherited, and he passed it on, the barley and the date palms and the duty all together, to the boy who'd one day wake in the dark to the same slow drum. And that boy would stand at the edge of the same field, rest a hand on the same barley, and understand, the way his father had, that the land feeding him was also the reason he'd have to leave it. That was the bargain. It always had been. You held the ground, and one day the ground called you away from itself.